Think about the last time you held a paper cup. The way the rim feels against your lip, slightly soft, slightly damp. The way the sides bend between your fingers when you squeeze. The heat bleeding through the wall, just enough that you switch hands after a few seconds. The small damp ring it leaves on the counter, slowly spreading at the edges. It's probably the most unremarkable object in your life, and that's what makes this whole thing so strange. That cup was invented to stop a disease. The people who made it, a Boston attorney who never designed anything before, and a failed salesman who found a weirdly effective pitch, genuinely believed they were saving lives. The paper cup helped end one of the deadliest public health threats of the early 20th century. But the fix that made it work, the thin layer of plastic that keeps the cup from dissolving in your hand, turned the same object into something that's everywhere practically impossible to recycle, and slowly shedding microscopic plastic into everything it touches. First, you have to understand what came before. In 1908, if you were thirsty at school or on a train, you drank from a tin dipper, a single metal cup chained to a public fountain. Chained, not metaphorically, a short length of actual metal bolted to the cooler. It lived there, attached to the side of a stone water cooler, waiting for the next stranger. Hundreds of people a day, sometimes thousands on busy train platforms. Same rim, same handle, same film of someone else's spit drying on the edge, and nobody saw a problem. A biologist at Lafayette College named Alvin Davison swabbed the shared drinking cups in public schools. What he found was so bad, so overwhelmingly contaminated with bacteria, that he wrote a paper with a title that still stops you cold: Death in School Drinking Cups. That was the actual title of a peer-reviewed article, not metaphor, not clickbait, a scientific paper. The Massachusetts State Board of Health reprinted it and circulated it to every school in the state. It's one of those rare moments where the title alone did the work. Then there's Dr. Samuel Crumbine on the Kansas State Board of Health. One day he watched a girl with active tuberculosis drink from a shared cup at a public fountain. One girl, one cup, one moment of disease transmission happening in plain sight in front of a man whose job was to stop it. Kansas became the first state to ban the common drinking cup in 1909. Other states followed. Now we get to Lawrence Luen, a Boston attorney. He was a Boston attorney, not a designer, not a manufacturer, not an engineer, a lawyer. In 1907, he was sharing office space with another lawyer whose clients had money and were interested in disposable cups. Luen looked at the problem and sketched a two-piece paper cup, a cone, and a separate handle. You use it once, you throw it away. No shared rim, no contamination. He called it the health cup. Nobody wanted it. And this is the part one genuinely find funny. People don't buy things that remind them they might get sick. The health cup was unfamiliar. It cost more than free water from a fountain. It solved a problem most people didn't believe existed. The company was bleeding money. The idea came within inches of dying right there. Enter Hugh Moore. Moore is the guy who saved it, and he understood something about people that Llewellyn didn't. He went to see a banker named Edgar Marston. He brought two things, a common drinking cup and a brush. He painted instant death on the rim of the cup. Then he made Marston look at it. He showed him how many strangers' mouths had touched that rim, how many different people's spit had dried on the same metal surface. He made the invisible threat visible. Marston invested $200,000. That's roughly $6 million today. The investors included the president of American Can Company. The paper cup suddenly had real manufacturing power behind it, all because a guy painted two words on a cup, but it was still a niche product. Railroad commuters bought them from vending machines. A few offices stocked them, nothing like what it was about to become. Then the 1918 Spanish flu hit, and I don't think people today appreciate how fast everything changed. Governments banned shared cups almost overnight. Railroads, schools, courthouses, theaters, public buildings, they all needed alternatives immediately, and the paper cup was the only practical option. If you wanted a drink of water in public during the pandemic, you used a paper cup. It was the law. It's exactly like Zoom during COVID-19. A product that existed, nobody felt urgent about it. Then suddenly it was the only way to do something you needed. By 1919, the company had renamed the product. The health cup was dead. The new name came from the doll company next door, the Dixie Doll Company in New York. The word Dixie also referred to $10 notes from Louisiana, from the French dix, reliable as old currency, they said. The point was friendly and warm, instead of clinical and sterile. Dixie cups became a household name, and here's where it gets complicated. Because the paper cup genuinely saved lives. The Smithsonian called it a life-saving technology in 2012, and that's not exaggeration. It helped stop the spread of tuberculosis, influenza, and other communicable diseases during an era before widespread vaccines. It was a real public health breakthrough, but But the original paper cup had a fundamental design problem. Water soaked right through it. After a few minutes, the cup went soft in your hand. Hot drinks were impossible. At first, manufacturers tried wax. Waxed paper cups appeared in 1932. The wax kept the cup dry, and it was biodegradable. But wax melts when things get hot. Your morning coffee could still soften the cup, so they kept looking. The fix that stuck was a thin polyethylene lining. Just enough plastic to seal the paper and keep the liquid away from the fibers. That lining is about 5% of the cup by weight, and that 5% makes the cup completely unrecyclable. Paper mills can't process polyethylene, it gums up their equipment. Plastic recyclers don't want paper mixed with their material, it contaminates the entire batch. So the cup, 95% paper and 5% plastic, doesn't fit anywhere. It goes to landfill, every single one. Now scale that. Globally, about 500 billion single-use cups are thrown away every year. Let me put that number in perspective. 500 billion individual cups? The United States alone accounts for roughly 120 billion of those. Less than 1% of plastic cups are recycled anywhere in the world. I looked into this more, and it gets worse. Even polypropylene cups, the #5 plastic cups that recycling programs technically accept, have a U.S. recycling rate of 0.6%. When cities include them in curbside pickup, only about 5% can actually be processed. There are barely any buyers for the reprocessed material. The infrastructure doesn't exist. To produce all those cups, about 20 million trees are cut down every year, roughly a forest the size of Connecticut. The manufacturing process generates roughly 6.5 million metric tons of carbon dioxide for an object you use for 15 minutes. And it gets worse. In 2020, researchers at the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, tested what happens when you pour hot water into a paper cup. They used water at 85 degrees Celsius, standard coffee temperature, and let it sit for 15 minutes. One cup released approximately 25,000 microplastic particles into the water, plus over 100 million submicron particles per 100 milliliters, small enough to cross biological barriers, to enter your bloodstream, your organs, your cells. They also found traces of toxic heavy metals in the lining: lead, chromium, cadmium. If you drink 300 milliliters of hot coffee from a plastic-lined cup every day, you're ingesting roughly 363,000 microplastic particles per year, just from the cup. Not from the coffee, from the container. Australian researchers tested 400 cups and found that heat is the main driver. Switching from cold to hot increased particle release by a third. The hotter the drink, the more the lining sheds into what you're consuming. So the cup that was designed to keep disease out of your water is now putting plastic and heavy metals directly into your body. The Dixie Cup Company was eventually acquired by Georgia-Pacific. In 2005, Koch Industries bought Georgia-Pacific for $21 billion. Koch is now the second largest privately held company in the United States. The brand that started as a public health crusade, a product designed by a lawyer who watched strangers share spit on a tin cup, funded by a guy who painted instant death on a rim, ended up owned by a conglomerate that has fought plastic waste regulation for decades. That's not irony. That's a perfect arc. In April 2026, the last visible monument to the whole story came down. The 68-foot Dixie Cup water tower in Easton, Pennsylvania, a poured concrete replica of the cup itself, visible from the highway for generations, was demolished and removed. The plant that made the cups is still there, vacant since 1983 when production moved to Forks, but the tower is gone, no more giant cup on the skyline. So think about that cup again, the heat on your palm, the way the rim feels against your lip, the way the sides soften after a few minutes. The small ring it leaves behind on the counter, it was made to stop a plague, and it did, but the fix that made it work, the thin layer of plastic that lets you drink hot coffee from a paper cup without it dissolving in your hands, is now in the ground, in the water, in your body.